No matter how you slice it, criminals aren't exactly the warm and fuzzy types. Even the smallest of their actions can leave a lasting mark on their victims, whether that be physical pain, emotional scars, or deep psychological wounds. But some criminals, they're on a whole different level. We're talking about the highest security prisons, the ones that make your skin crawl just thinking about them. Inside those walls are some truly terrifying dudes. Names like Neo, Alvin Jenkins, and Andre Chikatilo, the Butcher of Rostov. These guys are the worst of the worst. Even locked up, they still manage to be scary. Today, we're going to dive into some creepy, never-before-seen footage of these guys. Prepare to be unsettled. We're talking about seeing these monsters at their most intimidating. It's going to be wild. Nico Allen Jenkins. Nico Allen Jenkins, a 27-year-old with roots tracing back to an Omaha chief, had a life that was anything but easy. His past was riddled with trouble, including spending 10.5 years in prison for carjacking. During that time, his violent outbursts and struggles with mental health were pretty much overlooked. Despite all this, Jenkins was let out of prison on July 30, 2013, with hardly any support or supervision. It was a decision that would haunt the community just 2 weeks later. On August 11th, Jenkins unleashed a wave of terror on Omaha, Nebraska, going on a killing spree that shocked everyone. He lured two men, 26-year-old Juan Uribe Peña and 25-year-old Jorge Cahiga Ruiz, to Spring Lake Park with the promise of something far more innocent. Instead, he shot them in the head and robbed them, leaving their bodies behind in a white Ford pickup truck near a local swimming pool at 18th and F Street. Fast forward 8 days to August 19th, and Jenkins struck again. This time, he took the life of 36-year-old Curtis Bradford, a man he had crossed paths with in prison. Jenkins shot him outside a garage at 18th and Clark Street. Just the day before, Bradford had posed for a photo with Jenkins, totally unaware of the looming danger. That photo, found on Jenkins' phone, showed the two men smiling, a haunting image given what would come next. Jenkins's final act of horror came on August 21st, when he gunned down 33-year-old Andrea Kruger, a mother of three. He shot her multiple times with a 12-gauge shotgun, leaving her body on the road at 168th and 4th Street around 2:15 in the morning. Her vehicle, a 2002 Ford Expedition, was later found abandoned and partially burned at 43rd and Charles Street. Thanks to security cameras, Jenkins was quickly tracked down and arrested on August 30th at his girlfriend Chelsea Blackley's house. During a grueling 8-hour interview, Jenkins confessed to the killings, claiming he was under the influence of an ancient serpent god named Apophis. The trial that followed was nothing short of chaotic. Jenkins decided to represent himself, displaying unpredictable behavior, speaking in tongues, howling, and even laughing as the details of his crimes were recounted. Despite his claims of mental illness, a psychiatrist deemed him competent to stand trial. Jenkins was sentenced to death by a panel of 3 judges, Judge Peter Bataillon, Judge Thomas Otepka, and Judge Dwayne Doherty. On top of that, he received an additional 450 years for weapons charges. The whole case left the community reeling, raising serious questions about how the correctional system handles inmates with mental health issues. The aftermath of Jenkins's crimes was devastating. His name became a symbol of fear and horror in the community. The families of his victims were left shattered, struggling to find a way forward. Maria Uribe, the mother of Juan Uribe Peña, and Maria Cahiga Ruiz, the sister of Jorge Cahiga Ruiz, stood up in court to share their pain and loss. Curtis Bradford's mother, Susan Bradford, and Andrea Kruger's husband, Michael Kruger, also spoke of their deep grief and the challenge of coping with such senseless violence. Jenkins had a long history of mental health issues, including schizophrenia and antisocial personality disorder. He even filed a federal lawsuit, claiming that his mental health had worsened due to solitary confinement and neglect by prison officials. If you think Jenkins was bad news, then this next person will blow your mind. Michael Campbell. This picture shows Michael Campbell before his drastic transformation, and now, after covering his face and body with numerous tattoos, he's almost unrecognizable. But after decking himself out like a walking horror movie, he earned himself the title of World's Scariest Prisoner. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that. This guy has a rap sheet longer than your arm. Assault, burglary, grand theft, you name it, he's probably done it. But the real kicker is when he tried to attack a woman while she was in bed with her boyfriend. We don't know exactly what he was planning, but someone saw the boyfriend chasing after a guy covered in tattoos. The cops got involved, and after a little cat-and-mouse game, they caught Campbell trying to escape on a bike. With a criminal history spanning 26 years, it was no surprise he was heading back to jail. For a long time this time, whatever happened to him after that is a mystery, lost to the internet. But one thing's for sure, this guy belongs behind bars. Michael Ivor Charles. Michael Ivor Charles, better known as Charles Bronson, but born Michael Gordon Peterson on December 6, 1952, was a constant challenge for British law enforcement throughout his criminal journey, even while behind bars. From a young age, Bronson showed a knack for getting into trouble, engaging in countless street fights and scuffles that quickly earned him a reputation as a tough guy. But it wasn't just his street brawls that put him on the criminal map. It was a more significant crime that really made people take notice. In 1974, Bronson tried his hand at robbing a post office in Luton, which quickly spiraled into a wild showdown with the cops. Armed with a sawn-off shotgun, Bronson went head-to-head with law enforcement, injuring several officers before they finally managed to catch him. During his trial, Bronson's unpredictable and explosive behavior was on full display. He disrupted court sessions, attacked prison guards, and even his own defense lawyer, earning himself a reputation as a dangerously volatile individual. Due to his erratic behavior, Bronson was deemed mentally unstable and sent to the high-security psychiatric hospital Broadmoor. But even there, his violent tendencies didn't let up. He attacked fellow patients and staff and even attempted to take hostages on more than one occasion, keeping hospital authorities on high alert. It was during his time at Broadmoor that he adopted the name Charles Bronson, inspired by the famous Hollywood actor. As Bronson's infamy grew, so did the efforts to contain him. He was shuffled between several maximum security prisons, including Parkhurst, Wakefield, and Belmarsh. Each move came with increased security measures as authorities struggled to keep a lid on his violent outbursts. His constant defiance of prison rules often landed him in solitary confinement, where he spent up to 23 hours a day alone. Despite these harsh conditions, Bronson threw himself into physical fitness and bodybuilding. He even wrote a book called Solitary Fitness, where he not only shared stories from his life, but also offered fitness tips that found an audience beyond the prison walls. Bronson's violent reputation earned him both fear and a strange sort of admiration, as his daring exploits behind bars cemented his legendary status. In 1998, Bronson pulled off a dramatic hostage-taking at HMP Belmarsh. Armed with makeshift weapons, he took 2 inmates hostage and demanded a helicopter to escape. The standoff lasted hours before authorities finally regained control, adding another chapter to Bronson's wild and unpredictable story. Over the years, Bronson's violent behavior continued, with numerous run-ins with both inmates and prison staff, leaving chaos in his wake. His reputation as a formidable and enigmatic figure only grew stronger with time. Since 1999, Bronson has channeled some of his energy into writing poetry and creating art. He's written 11 books, including his own Looniology in My Own Words. In 2008, his creative talents were recognized when he won 11 Kessler Trust Awards for his poetry and artwork. Then, in 2023, Bronson took another step to prove his ability to pursue a meaningful life outside prison by showcasing his drawings in an exhibition, all in a bid to strengthen his case for parole. Alvin Causs. Just the name was enough to send shivers down the spines of even the toughest guys. They whispered it in the dark, like a ghost story. He was the king of the bad guys, the baddest of the bad, so feared they called him public enemy number 1. And get this, he was the only one the feds ever caught alive. They said his smile was creepy, like something out of a nightmare. Born in a place called Montreal, Quebec in 1907, Causs didn't have the best start in life. By the time he was 10, he was hanging out with gamblers and bootleggers, folks who lived on the wrong side of the tracks. Life took a serious turn when he was 19. Busted for trying to break into a place, he got a 10-year stay in the big house. But this guy wasn't built for bars. He broke out and teamed up with a guy named Lawrence Duvall, and they started causing trouble all over the place. Things really kicked into high gear when Karpis met a guy named Fred Barker in the Slammer. These two hit it off and formed a gang that would become the stuff of legends, the Barker-Karpis gang. They robbed banks, kidnapped people, and were as cold as ice. People were terrified of them. They pushed their luck too far when they killed a sheriff named C. Roy Kelly. That made Karpis a name you never wanted to hear. The feds, led by this guy J. Edgar Hoover, weren't going to let these bad boys get away with it. They hunted them down like crazy. Things came to a head when they kidnapped some guy named Edward Bremer. That really ticked off President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The feds were on their case like white on rice. Finally, on May 1st, 1936, they caught up with Karpis in New Orleans. Bam! Just like that, the reign of terror was over. Karpis got sent away for life. He ended up in Alcatraz, that supermax prison. He got a 26-year sentence. And get this, while he was locked up, he met this young kid named Charles Manson. Apparently, Karpis taught him to play the guitar. Who would have thought? Walking out of prison after a whopping 30-year stretch in 1969, Alvin Karpis stepped into a world that was totally different. No more was he the big bad guy, the criminal mastermind everyone feared. Nope, he was just another guy trying to figure out life in a world that had moved on without him. They sent him packing to Canada, but even that wasn't easy. Because of some dumb thing he did years ago, removing his own fingerprints, he had a heck of a time getting a Canadian passport. Eventually, he settled down in Montreal and tried to live a normal life. It couldn't have been easy, though. How do you go from being a big-time gangster to a regular Joe? To cope with the whole mess, Karpis started writing about his life. He spilled the beans on his crazy criminal days and his time locked up in Alcatraz. Karpis thought he'd found peace in Spain in 1973, but life had other plans. He died there in 1979. At first, people thought he'd done it on purpose, but it turned out to be natural causes. Next on the list is probably the biggest bully in prison history, Thomas Edward Silverstein. Thomas Edward Silverstein wasn't your average Joe. Nope, this guy was the kind of person who made guards and inmates alike break out in a cold sweat. Born plain old Thomas Conway on the 4th of February 1952 in Long Beach, California, his life took a pretty rough turn when his parents decided to split up and remarry. Fast forward a bit, and he ended up with a new dad named Sid Silverstein. That's when things started getting interesting. Growing up, young Thomas learned how to throw a punch. Not for fun, mind you, but because life taught him it was a necessary skill. By the time he was 14, he'd already gotten himself into some serious trouble for being a bit too rough. So, off to juvenile detention he went. It was there that he learned how to survive and even thrive in a world where everyone's out for themselves. By the time 1971 rolled around, Thomas had traded in his childhood for a life of crime. His first big ticket to the Slammer was for armed robbery. A short taste of freedom later, he was back behind bars in 1975, this time with his old man and cousin for a whole string of heists. But the real party started in 1977 when he landed a 15-year stay at Leavenworth Prison in Kansas. That's where the legend of Thomas Silverstein really began to take shape. The tough prison life, combined with his new buddies in the Aryan Brotherhood, a gang with a reputation as scary as theirs comes, turned him into a downright terrifying figure. The more power he gained within the gang, the more of a monster he became. It was a perfect storm of violence and bad behavior, and it was just the beginning. In 1980, Thomas Silverstein landed at USP Marion. This is where his ties to the Aryan Brotherhood really took hold. You know, that gang with the nasty reputation for racism and running the prison like their own personal kingdom? Things were about to get a whole lot darker. The first big mess he got into was the murder of a guy named Danny Atwell. They nailed him for it and threw away the key. But guess what? They found out later that some people lied under oath, so they let him off the hook. Even though he was free, everyone knew he was a stone-cold killer. Just a year later, in 1981, he was in the middle of another crazy brawl. This time, he was accused of killing a member of the DC Black Gang, a guy called Robert Chappelle. Things were already tense between the two groups, and then this guy named Raymond Cadillac Smith, the boss of the DC Blacks, showed up. All hell broke loose. Silverstein and another inmate, Clayton Fountain, ended up killing Smith in the most brutal way you can imagine. 67 stab wounds. They even paraded the body around to scare everyone. Talk about a power move. For that, he got another life sentence. But the craziest thing happened on October 22, 1983. Silverstein decided to go to war with the prison system. He murdered a guard, Merle Klutz, with a homemade knife. It was like he was saying, "Mess with me, and this is what happens." Can you believe this guy spent 36 out of his 42 years locked up alone? That's a long time to be by yourself. They put him in this supermax prison called ADX Florence, where they keep the worst of the worst. When he died in 2019, he held the record for the longest time in solitary. And why? Because of all the terrible stuff he did, especially killing that guard. Joanna Den. Something crazy happened in Cambridgeshire, England, back in March 2013. It was like something out of a nightmare. The police found 3 bodies dumped in ditches outside Peterborough, all of them with knife holes in them. That's not all. Not by a long shot. 2 other guys were found stabbed up in Hereford, but luckily for them, they pulled through. The police were freaked out. They thought this killer had to be some kind of monster, some big, strong guy. But get this, the person behind these horrible crimes was a woman. Joanna Christine Dennehy, her name was. She'd cooked up this crazy plan with her boyfriend, Gary Stretch, to copy Bonnie and Clyde. They wanted to kill 9 people total just for kicks. It's sick, I know. Dennehy later told a shrink that she got a weird kind of thrill out of murder, like it was an addiction or something. Fast forward to November 2013. Dennehy admitted to killing those 3 people and trying to kill the other 2. She ended up in HM Prison Bronzefield, which is no picnic. Turns out she's got some serious mental problems, psychopath, antisocial personality disorder, the whole lot. The craziest part? She didn't seem to care one bit. During her trial, she was laughing and joking around. Can you believe it? In the end, they locked her up for life, but she's still causing trouble. She's found new girlfriends who are just as messed up as her, and she's always picking fights with the guards and other prisoners. It's a crazy story, isn't it? A real-life horror story. And it just goes to show you the dark side of human nature. Richard Lee McNair. Richard Lee McNair was born on the 19th of December, 1958. He had a knack for getting into trouble that most folks just don't have. Murder, attempted murder, and burglary? Those were just a few of the items on his rap sheet. The judge thought 2 life sentences would keep him locked up tight. But if there's one thing Richard Lee McNair loved more than trouble, it was freedom. His journey into the world of Most Wanted started in 1987 with a robbery gone terribly wrong. You know how it goes. One minute you're dreaming of easy money, the next you're staring at a life behind bars. But McNair wasn't about to let a little thing like a life sentence get him down. Nope, he had other plans. Escape plans, to be exact. His first getaway was something out of a magic show. He was put in handcuffs, but these proved to be ineffective as a little lip balm and a whole lot of determination, and poof, he was gone. Now you'd think that getting caught would teach him a lesson, right? Slow down, maybe enjoy the peace and quiet of a prison cell, but nah, not McNair. Just 4 years later, he was back at it. But the granddaddy of all his escapes was in April 2006. This guy was on another level. He hid himself in a stack of old mailbags. The nerve of this guy. Even the cops couldn't believe their eyes when they figured out what happened. And then there was that time he almost got caught, but talked his way out of it. It was an afternoon in April 2006. McNair was out jogging when a cop spotted him. Instead of panicking or trying to make a run for it, McNair just casually told the officer he was out for a workout. He even said he was staying with his brother at a nearby hotel. Not content with just staying under the radar at home, McNair decided to up the ante and made not 1 but 2 bold trips into Canada, all while desperately trying to stay 1 step ahead of the law. Fast forward to 2007, more than a year after his daring escape, and McNair's luck finally ran out when Canadian police spotted him driving a stolen car. But McNair wasn't ready to give up easily. During interrogation, he managed to pull off another vanishing act, slipping away from the authorities once again. While on the run, McNair was anything but idle. He became a master of creating fake IDs and used his computer skills to forge driver's licenses, all while keeping a close eye on media coverage of his adventures. His bold moves didn't go unnoticed, earning him a spot on Canada's 15 Most Wanted list multiple times. Then, in November 2007, an eagle-eyed police officer noticed a van with some suspicious homemade tinted windows and jotted down the license plate before reporting it. The very next day, another officer spotted the van, and that's when the chase began. When McNair eventually parked and tried to make a run for it on foot, law enforcement finally caught up with him. Today, McNair calls ADX Florence home, a supermax prison where inmates spend 23 hours a day locked in their cells under strict supervision to make sure escape is never an option. Next on the list is a hardened criminal that made an appearance on a TV show, Rodney Alcala. Rodney Alcala, a serial killer who shockingly made an appearance on the TV show The Dating Game back in 1978, was hiding some pretty dark secrets behind that charming smile of his. On the show, he was bachelor number one, smoothly answering questions with a flirtatious tone that completely masked his sinister intentions. The audience had no idea that the man they were watching was actually a brutal predator, responsible for the deaths of several innocent women, including Pamela Lamb, Jill Barkham, Georgia Wickstead, Charlotte Lamb, and Jill Parento. His participation in the show was a stark and unsettling contrast to the gruesome crimes he was committing. Alcala had a knack for manipulating people, a skill that helped him lure his victims. The show's playful format played right into his hands, giving him the perfect stage to showcase his charm. Host Jim Lang, like everyone else, had no clue as he encouraged the banter. Alcala's responses, though tinged with hints of what lay beneath, were delivered with the ease of a man just looking for a fun date, not a murderer trying to stay out of prison. Cheryl Bradshaw, the bachelorette who chose him, later recalled feeling uneasy around him, and she ultimately refused to go on a date with him, a decision that very likely saved her life. "He was creepy," Bradshaw later said. "I felt uncomfortable around him." While Alcala was playing the part of the charming bachelor on TV, investigators were working hard to piece together a series of brutal murders that would eventually be tied to him. His horrific method involved luring young women with the promise of a photo shoot, only to assault, torture, and kill them. Unfortunately, the truth about Alcala came to light too late for his victims. The investigation that finally led to Alcala's arrest and trial was a complicated one, filled with missed chances and relentless detective work. It all started with the disappearance of 12-year-old Robin Christine Samso in 1979. Detectives searched the area for clues, interviewed witnesses, and followed every lead. One key piece of evidence was a pair of gold ball earrings found in a small pouch in Alcala's storage locker. These earrings would later become a crucial piece of forensic evidence linking him to Samso, as her mother identified them as belonging to her daughter. Alcala was arrested on July 24, 1979, and charged with Samso's abduction and murder. He chose to represent himself in court, using bizarre and unsettling tactics to try to charm and outsmart the jury. But despite his efforts, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was convicted of Samso's murder and sentenced to death in 1980. However, Alcala's conviction was overturned twice due to technicalities, leading to new trials each time. With each trial, more evidence surfaced, including a disturbing collection of photographs taken by Alcala of his potential victims. In 2010, more than 30 years after his initial arrest, Alcala was finally found guilty of 4 additional murders and sentenced to death for the 3rd time. Rodney Alcala's case is a chilling reminder of how dangerous manipulation can be and the importance of persistence in the pursuit of justice. Despite his ability to hide in plain sight and charm those around him, his crimes eventually caught up with him, and he was brought to justice in the end. Ricky Dubose. On June 13, 2017, a couple of hardened criminals, Ricky Dubose and Donnie Rowe, were being shuffled around from one prison to another. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Well, that was until they decided to turn the whole thing upside down. They're on a bus, surrounded by guards, when all of a sudden these two guys slip out of their handcuffs like it's nothing. And then, boom! They burst through an unlocked gate at the front of the bus. To make matters worse, Dubose grabs a gun from one of the guards and just starts firing. Sergeant Christopher Monica and Sergeant Curtis Ballou, the poor guys in charge of keeping everyone in line, didn't stand a chance. It was a total bloodbath. Crazy thing is, there were cameras on the bus. So, we've all got a front row seat to this horror show. And get this, there were like 30 other prisoners on board who saw the whole thing go down. Everyone's story was the same. Rowe didn't last long on the run. They caught him a few days later. By September of 2017, he was locked up for life with no chance of parole. Talk about a swift kick in the pants. The whole thing sent shockwaves through the community. People were freaking out about the danger these officers face every day. It was a real wake-up call. Fast forward to June 2022. Dubose, the other guy from the bus attack, is found dead in his cell. Officially, it was suicide. But come on, something about that just doesn't sit right. On a sunny day in June 2017, a real bad guy named Ricky Dubose was on a prison bus trip with another inmate called Donnie Rowe. You wouldn't believe what happened next. Quiet as a mouse, these two dudes slipped out of their handcuffs and busted through an unlocked door at the front of the bus. Can you imagine? Next thing you know, Dubose grabs a gun from one of the guards and bam! He shoots Sergeant Christopher Monica and then the driver, Sergeant Curtis Ballou. Cold-blooded, right? There were cameras on the bus, so the whole thing was caught on tape. Plus, there were like 30 other prisoners watching the whole thing go down. They all told the same story. Donnie Rowe didn't stay on the run for long, just a few days. By September of 2017, he was locked up for life without any chance of getting out. The whole thing was a shock. People couldn't believe how dangerous it is to be a prison guard. And that's not all. Fast forward to June 2022. Dubose is found all unresponsive in his cell at this place called the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson. The official story is that he killed himself, but nobody really knows what happened. Suspicious, right? It gets even weirder. Some say that Dubose had been acting strange for weeks before his death, like he knew something was going to happen. Others claim that there were whispers among the inmates about some sort of inside deal or cover-up. Whatever the truth is, it remains one of those unsettling mysteries that leaves everyone wondering what really went down behind those prison walls. And the questions don't end there. How does someone with such a violent history end up in a position where they can take their own life? Theories abound, but answers are few, leaving the families of his victims and the public still searching for closure in a case that's anything but closed. Speculation continues to grow, with some pointing fingers at the prison administration, while others believe that Dubose's death was the result of something far more sinister. Until more information comes to light, this dark chapter remains shrouded in uncertainty and doubt, fueling endless debates and conspiracy theories. In the end, the case of Ricky Dubose serves as a grim reminder of the unresolved issues within the prison system and the potential for injustice, even behind bars. The truth may never be fully revealed, leaving everyone involved with more questions than answers. As time passes, the story of Dubose's crimes and mysterious death only grows more enigmatic, capturing the imagination of those who seek to uncover the truth. The echoes of his violent actions and untimely demise continue to reverberate, a haunting testament to the dark complexities of the criminal justice system. Which of these prisoner stories shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe to support the channel. And keep your eyes peeled for our next video. More fascinating discussions are on the way.